Deliberate cold exposure is one way to enrich the amount of brown fat. You get a stronger furnace. And there's some wonderful science on this published recently in Cell Reports Medicine by the first author is Susanna Soberg from Denmark. And it's really amazing work. What they showed is that 11 minutes a week divided up into a couple sessions of 2 to 3 minutes of deliberate cold exposure increases the density of brown fat in adults and allows them to feel more comfortable in cold temperatures when they're just walking around, okay? But also when they put themselves into this deliberate, that then they achieve much bigger increases in core resting metabolism, improvements in blood lipid and insulin management profiles. And there's some other positive effects like improved mental resilience. So a lot of positive effects. I started off my career studying thermoregulation. That's what I did as an undergrad. And so I have a deep love of that literature. We have a storage of healthy fat in our body called brown fat, which is literally brown under the microscope because it's rich with mitochondria. Think of it as the oil in a candle. It allows you to feel warm in cold temperatures, and it acts as a furnace for your metabolism. It's generally enriched around the clavicles, upper back, and around the heart, a little bit around the liver. It's not the blubbery fat that people generally want to have less of. It's a deep tissue fat. It's really healthy. Children have a lot of it. You tend to lose it over time unless you do cold exposure. The biggest effect is a big increase, 2.5x increase in dopamine that lasts for several hours. It's a significant increase. You feel mentally clear. You feel alert. It increases metabolism for the reason we discussed before. And then there's the process of getting into this cold water when you didn't want to. And that is overriding limbic friction. That's that top-down control. So you build resilience. And no surprise there, a lot of the screening tools for special operations and other screening tools involve forcing people deliberately forcing themselves, I should say, to get into cold bodies of water that are really uncomfortable, but not dangerously cold. There are other effects too. For instance, if you want to enhance fat loss and lipolysis, it does seem like activating shiver is key, because when you shiver, the muscles release a molecule called succinate. Succinate then goes and activates the brown fat, so you get a further increase in metabolism. One of the best things you can do is get into the cold source, whatever it happens to be. If you don't shiver while you're in there, get out, but don't dry off and just stand there. You'll start to shiver pretty quickly as it starts to evaporate off you.
Cold, therapy, whether it's cold shower or the extreme cases, ice baths. Yes, there are physiological changes that happen. Yes, your body learns to acclimate. I mean, it's like training a muscle. Your body's ability to acclimate to cold or hot is something that you can strengthen and improve. And because we're always in air-conditioned and heated rooms, we don't ever train them. But the real benefit is learning to be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the big benefit.
I want to be able to handle the extreme changes in temperature. You're teaching your body to adapt to that and become very good at that. And if it's very good at that, when we head into things like wintertime, your body adapts. It handles that. When most people are susceptible to getting sick, it ain't no big deal for you. So I find that being one of the most beneficial things about it.
Well, studies support that. People who do ice baths or use saunas or do cold showers do get less infections every single year. Now, the problem with that is I've looked at the studies, and they did control for all these factors, but it's really, really hard to control for the healthy bias factor.
Right.
And what I mean by that is the person who spends the time to do these things also probably leads a healthier life.
When exposed to cold locally, whether you just put your hands in ice or you submerge your full body immersion in ice, we have that cold shock response. With that comes benefits like improved immunity. We get that mitochondrial biogenesis, which you produce more mitochondrial cells, which has direct impact on muscular endurance. We see a lot of benefits in terms of your body's ability to recover. So you can adapt and habituate to cold exposure. And at the end of the day, cold exposure is a stressor. And again, the body doesn't differentiate between cold and a fight and a stressor at home, finance, whatever it is, family. It doesn't differentiate between any of that. So if you can delay the onset of if you can adapt to cold exposure, which elicits the same responses, then it'll make you better able to handle and more resilient to other stressors in life.
And cold stress, much like heat stress, is a type of hormetic stress that activates all these genetic pathways that help us deal with stress. Probably one of the most robust responses to cold stress that I have seen in the literature is the robust increase in norepinephrine in the locus coeruleus region of the brain. Norepinephrine in the brain plays a very important role in focus and attention and vigilance, also in mood. So it makes you feel better. Norepinephrine is something that's actually pharmacologically targeted quite often, so it's used to treat depression and also ADHD, but it can be released by cold shocking the body. Something else very cool about norepinephrine, in addition to being a neurotransmitter, it actually acts as a hormone as well, and we also release it in our body because it causes vasoconstriction, and that's one of the mechanisms that we use to conserve heat when we're cold. So another mechanism that we use to generate heat is also related to norepinephrine, and that has to do with increasing mitochondrial biogenesis in your adipose tissue and in your muscle tissue. These mitochondria the mitochondrial biogenesis occurs with cold exposure. You can think about it, it makes perfect sense because as you generate energy, as a byproduct, you generate heat. And so this is an adaptive mechanism that occurs to help you warm up when you're cold. So this mitochondrial biogenesis that happens in the adipose tissue is often referred to as browning of fat. And cold exposure has also been shown to improve in very preliminary studies to improve endurance in some athletes, including runners and cyclists and tennis players. So there's this, the ongoing study looking at how cold exposure may actually enhance endurance performance because of this mitochondrial biogenesis, among other things. It also reduces inflammation and helps with recovery time.
You get the most of the result by doing this. The cold trains your immune system to be boosted. And that's what you need to get no flu, no colds, no inflammation, depression. All that is not going to happen.
A key point when thinking about the use of cold as a tool, and the key point is that you have a baseline level of temperature that is varying, changing across the 24-hour cycle. So any use of deliberate cold exposure is going to be superimposed on that rhythm, that circadian rhythm, meaning that 24-hour rhythm.
You have two types of fat. You have white fat and brown fat. The white adipose tissue is just energy stored for later use. This is the body fat that we want to burn to look lean and muscular. And then you have brown adipose tissue. Now the brown fat, what that does is it takes in glucose and it burns that glucose to generate heat for your body. And what studies have shown is that just a short amount of cold exposure, like a cold shower, for example, can actually increase that glucose uptake by up to 15-fold. What this means is that your brown fat will be burning a lot more energy to generate more heat. So what this does is naturally raises your BMR.
Dr. Gallo does mention that cold exposure alone is enough to trigger our fight or flight response, releasing hormones like adrenaline and thus increasing our sense of alertness.
I feel more alive in the most literal sense when I'm done swimming in the cold than I do any other time.
There's also a study that shows that, and this is a short-term effect, but if a man takes cold showers, his testosterone levels increase, I think, over the course of 10 days. Then they come back down to baseline. But you do get this initial boost in testosterone.
That's another huge benefit that I think. I mean, do it and watch how alert and awake and how sharp you feel right afterwards.
True.
Tony Robbins is big on this, right? He does the plunge and jumps on the trampoline before all his talks. That's like one of his rituals that he does.
Better than any nitro I've had.
Oh, no, it'll wake you right up. And back to the original question with the shower. Showers do a great job. Yes, it's nothing compared to cryo or an ice bath. But I tell you what, if you end every morning with the last minute to 2 minutes all the way cold, no warm water at all, you'll see a big difference just from doing that alone.